Hello, listeners. Welcome to yet another special episode of Courage Talks. Special guest today is Mr. Ravi Venkatesan. He's got more than 3 decades of experience in the industry. Very well known for his lucid thoughts and great experience. Pleasure to have you, sir.
Hey, nice to be here.
Thank you very much, sir. So the topic is Courage Talks, and the background story is obviously my book Against All Odds. What is your understanding of courage? And if you could cite any role models, if you may.
I think the best definition of courage, or the one that's worked best for me, is actually Nelson Mandela's. And he said famously that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to continue to operate despite your fear. And I've written a lot also about courage. It's there in my last book, What the Heck Do I Do With My Life? Because I think it's the most essential quality for leadership. And it's also one of the most central things if you want to get through life. I think much of the miserable situation we see in the world today is because you've got people in positions of power who lack courage. So I'm very happy to see you do this podcast series and try and propagate an understanding of what it means. When you say, your question was, who are your role models? Well, look, as we were talking, courage is not about important people doing amazing things.
Yeah.
So you just look around you and you see ordinary people going through life.
Yeah.
And there are profound examples of courage. You see the lives of your own maid, driver, co-workers, and without any song and dance and celebration and spotlights.
Yeah.
They're dealing quietly, with dignity, with courage, with all of life's challenges. So, I wouldn't cite some iconic person or any such thing.
Yeah.
I think there are millions and millions of daily acts of courage, and we should celebrate that.
I'm glad that you touched upon the examples of a maid or a driver because, one thing which I have deduced, in the past few episodes on the podcast as well, does privilege prevent courage? Do you think that having a privileged background, having luxury dethroned on you, especially in early days in your school and college, could actually prevent courage from seeping in when it has to?
I think it can, it needn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the more cosseted your life,
Yeah.
as opposed to having to deal with challenges right from an early stage, the more cosseted your life, the greater the risk that you will have neither character nor courage. Or pray for some challenges.
Yeah.
Because again, these are the crucibles in which we grow, develop, become leaders, develop courage, all those things.
Yeah. No, that's interesting word that you touched upon, character, right? And I had no privileged brought up. I was from a very simple middle class. My father was, of course, from a lower class, the way his childhood came about. But of course, my father went out of his way to ensure that we had a good childhood, right? I mean, we had the basic needs. We went to a good English medium school. I think what differentiated my father's upbringing and what resonated a lot with me was transparency. He was candid. I still remember, and I would like to share this. He would give his salary to me and my sister, not my mother, mind you, for us to be able to understand how the house operates. What's the budget like, and what are the ups and downs that you would see, right? So if you were denied a hotel outing, unless it's a birthday or an anniversary, was purely because we were short of funds at that point of time, not that he would want to deny me that privilege, or my sister for that matter. And it's interesting. I think the other reason I touched upon is because you dabble a lot with entrepreneurs, right? Budding entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, either in game or as a VC. And I've a lot of times seen people coming from sort of privileged background, getting into entrepreneurship and not getting it, right? They don't understand, why you need to be frugal, why you need to take those baby steps in learning the art of entrepreneurship before you go out and spend the money, which you can anyway spend at any point of time. And that, famous line, which is quoted in entrepreneurship, right? You can't throw money at every problem, right? Sometimes money is not the solution, right? So that's interesting point you touched upon. Sir, we know you a lot from your corporate world, but not many might know about your background. So why don't you just take us down memory lane, your growing up days? What's the earliest instance of your childhood that you remember and remains special to you?
My childhood was probably not terribly different from, sounds like what yours was. Came from a fairly simple middle-class background. We're now talking 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And so nobody had much of anything. And my father was a government servant in DRDO. My mom was a homemaker. And so we had stability, we had love, but not too much else. My parents made great sacrifices to put my sister and I through the best education possible. It was a simple life. I grew up in Pune and Chandigarh. And those were quite lovely cities in those days. I went to a boys' school, missionary school. And so there was great emphasis on academic achievement, some emphasis on sports. I was terrible at sports. One of my earliest memories was reading a story of Admiral Nelson, Horatio Nelson, British admiral who won famously the Battle of Trafalgar, which sealed England's victory over the French and the Spanish. And when he was a little boy, his grandmother was, talking about fear. And in the story, he asked his grandmother, what is fear? He had no understanding of fear.
Yeah.
And then later on, at the end of the story, he's in the middle of the battle.
Yeah.
And it's not going well for the English. And so he gets a signal to retreat and withdraw.
Yeah.
And he raises the telescope to his blind eye and says, what signal? I don't signal, and tells his commanders to keep fighting. And the battle turned and they won.
Yeah.
And then he dies in battle. But anyway, this was one of the most memorable stories for me because I had a lot of fears. And one of my big fears was ghosts. I don't know why, as a young boy, I was very scared of darkness. And somebody had to go into a room and turn on the light before I would go in because I was convinced there were ghosts inside. One day I just decided, look, I have to confront my fear. So I went and sat alone in a dark room until my fear went away.
Yeah, trouble with the darkness. Yeah.
But that's when I realized much of what we're afraid of is in the mind. It's not reality.
Yeah.
So the fear exists largely in the mind. And so you have to confront it.
Yeah.
And so from that point onwards, I went on confronting my fears and watching them melt away.
Yeah.
Growing up, my father was part of a generation that, along with Dr. Abdul Kalam and Dr. Raja Ramanna and others, they built up DRDO and, various institutions. And I remember, what courage it took from that generation of scientists and leaders. So my father was part of the first atomic device that India exploded called Smiling Buddha in 1974. And he would disappear for months because it was secret and they'd just go out somewhere. And later on, we learned it was Rajasthan. And those days, there were a lot of sanctions by the US against India. And somehow they had to overcome these odds. And when they were testing the device, when they pressed the button, it didn't go off. And so my father had to actually take a small lift and go down in the tunnel to see what was wrong with the device. It could have gone off.
Yeah.
And he'd be toast. But in any case, he came back up, they pressed it, and then it worked fine. But that's the kind of courage. Dr. Abdul Kalam, famously, about 1977 or 78, he was at ISRO.
Yeah.
And he overrode something and did a manual launch of SLV, satellite launch vehicle. That was the rocket probe. And the damn thing failed. And he very famously took entire ownership for the failure.
Yeah.
And he didn't throw anybody under the bus and blame the team and No, he said, my judgment, I made a mistake. And I remember that. So I was surrounded by people who showed courage without celebrating it on social media and all that. But 1975 was the emergency, 75, 70. And it was a very dark time in India, as it is today. People were afraid to speak. And I remember a relative of mine who was quite close to Mrs. Gandhi. And, he broke away from her and sacrificed power and good political life and even spent 3 months in jail. And I thought, wow, I was very fortunate in the life. I was just surrounded by people who demonstrated courage in a variety of ways without talking too much about it.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting, the incident that you mentioned about the button pressing and nothing happening. In fact, just finished reading Dr. Kalam's book, The Writer's Life, and it actually talks about that incident, and it made me laugh at it.
It was my dad who went down alone in that lift to see what was wrong. So, it's there in the book called Smiling Buddha.
Yes.
Anyway.
And the other thing I touched upon was your fear of darkness. And fear of darkness is basically because of ambiguity, right? I mean, you might be sitting comfortably, but you don't know who's around you, what's happening around you. And I think that's been a trait which I noticed in your career as well, right? I mean, Cummins, Microsoft, Bank of Baroda, Infosys. You went into the ambiguity world, right? You went into the unknown world, right? I mean, you obviously didn't have a pedigree which would have told you what happens in a public sector bank, right? When you took up that role. From an observer, from a customer perspective, I'm sure you were visibly unaware, but what goes inside would have been very difficult. What prompted you to take that courageous step and go into this realm of unknown multiple times over?
There's a famous American baseball player turned coach called Yogi Berra.
Yeah.
And Yogi Berra says things which sound weird but have some wisdom. So he says, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. So I've kind of operated that way. When there was an unusual or interesting opportunity that presented itself, I examined it, and usually I found a way to take it. So whether that was going to the US in 85 with no money, or deciding to come back, or joining Microsoft. Joining Microsoft actually took a lot of courage in 2003. It was attractive and exciting, but I wasn't from the tech industry, and the company had a famously difficult culture, which would spit out senior hires from the top. And most importantly, I think 10 out of 10 people whose advice I asked said, don't do it. My mother and wife Sonali said, don't do it. And mentors like Nandan Nilekani and Narayan Murthy said, don't do it. I can't remember one person who said, do it. But then I asked myself, look, I'm 40 now. When I turn 50, which will I regret more?
Yeah.
Having taken the role and been fired for incompetence a year later, or chickened out and never took it and lost, and then always worry and wonder what would it have been like. So I said, let's go and do it. And that gave me a lot of confidence, because 8 years later, I left. It was successful. Once you climb a mountain and come down safely, the next 10 mountains don't feel so scary.
Yeah, very true.
So Bank of Baroda was like that. Raghuram Rajan called me one day and said, look, would you do this? And I said, Raghu, well, I know nothing about banking, and I know nothing about public sector. I'm just not the least likely person. And he said, look, do you think you'll do worse than the guys who screwed it up before you? That's a pretty good reason. Let's go and give it our best. And it worked out quite well. So that's the way it's been with all these challenges. And I think any of us, once we get comfortable taking on new challenges, you develop the mindset, the confidence, the skills to do it. And then it becomes more like second nature.
So some couple of interesting points are emerging. The first point that you mentioned was culture, right? When you were considering Microsoft. And second is leadership, right? Does leadership necessarily influence culture? Were you able to impact culture at Microsoft through your leadership?
Culture is something that evolves. Culture, again, is not, and values are not what are written on the wall, but things that emerge based on how people act, particularly people in positions of power. Yeah, I think during my 8 years, we changed the way the company was. It was the people of the company. Every young person thought he was Bill Gates. Or she was Bill Gates. The reality we're all inconsequential people who were riding on a powerful brand and platform that Bill had built. So we brought in humility, and not by talking about it, by role modeling it. Or we brought, customers hated us because we were seen like a tax collector. You show up once a year to collect money. Rest of the time, you don't care about what happens.
Yeah.
We brought in or Neelam Dhawan at that time, more accurately, brought in a lot more customer centricity. Really brought in what Satya today calls a growth mindset. We didn't have a term for it then, but we set big ambitions, huge goals, and worked hard to achieve that. That brought in a growth mindset in the culture. All these things happened through the way we led. And then I think some of it stayed on, and then new leaders have come in, and things would have evolved further. So yeah, it's elastic. It's a living thing. Yeah. So I think the culture of Bank of Baroda changed a little bit during the few years I was there, but it's probably changed again.
Interesting. I want to touch upon what you mentioned about not knowing anything about the banking system when Bank of Baroda came up, and what they call the fear of unknown, right? So can the fear of unknown actually be a positive? I mean, a debut cricketer would probably have less pressure than a Virat Kohli going down to bat, because the debut cricketer really has nothing to lose. Do you think that
That's
turned out to be an advantage, the fact that you didn't have a pedigree of
yeah,
banking and you could excuse
absolutely.
yourself from a lot of challenges initially?
No, it's a very good point. So one of the things I write about is I've never been qualified for any job or role that I took. Okay. So even Microsoft, those days Bill Gates used to interview every senior person. When I met Bill for about 45 minutes, I said, Bill, look, I don't even do email. This is 2003 because my secretary prints out my email and he gives it to me at the end of the day. And then at night, I write up some stuff and give it back. So the only reason I'm here is because the headhunter said you'll never again meet Bill Gates, so get on a plane. So Bill said, look, you better learn how to do email fast, but maybe you will be a better listener. And that turned out to be prophetic because I spent my first year bringing a beginner's mind and listening to what customers said and what partners said and employees felt. And I think if I'd been from the industry, I would have jumped in knowing it all and trying to make changes. Whereas whether it was BOB or here or anywhere else, I think bringing a beginner's mind, humility, curiosity, listening is a huge advantage.
Hmm.
The other thing is, as you say, the less you have to lose, the freer you are in your mind.
Yeah.
So one of the very early decisions that we made in BOB 5 months after I joined it, the CEO, Jay and I sat down and said, look, this balance sheet is completely short. And also, investors don't know how much the magnitude of our bad loans are. And so the share price is depressed. Why don't we just write it off? And that seemed to require some great courage. But in January of 2016, we declared bad loans of 13,500 crores, which resulted in the most historic loss in the 100-year history of BOP and in the banking sector. And the stock price soared because
Yeah.
people said, oh, now we know what is the amount. Everybody was stunned because, oh, where did you have the courage to do this? We were the first bank to do it. After that, others followed.
Yeah.
But again, it comes from having this beginner's mind and not knowing what is precedent and what's possible, not possible. You just do what seems obvious.
True.
So I think it is a great advantage to having this quality, which I call beginner's mind.
Now, me and you can sit together and in hindsight bias, we can obviously talk big about it, right? But think about this poor guy who's just graduated and, he's faced this opportunity where he knows technically he's not fit and he's been called for the interview, right? What kind of courage would you need? Because I have one particular instance to share. I mean, in 2019, this owner of a private sector firm approached me for a job as a CEO for a EV manufacturing. I have never done operations. I have never worked in a EV company. And I was like, what's going on? Why is this guy interested? And I conferred with a friend of mine and she said, why are you worried? The guy who's hiring you should be worried about it, right?
Yeah,
I said, yeah, that
right.
makes sense. So I think owning up on something which is unknown and passing on the buck to someone else gives you a huge sense of freedom. I didn't ask
No,
for
I
it.
don't like the word you're using, passing on the buck, because
Sorry.
somebody can misunderstand that.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, what I
I
meant
think
was letting that ownership of that decision bestowed to someone else so that it's more of a collaborative work. Look, you got me on board to jointly work on this. Does
yeah,
that sound more appropriate?
I think what is appropriate is to be authentic and not pretend you're an expert on what you're
Of course.
not.
True. Yeah.
Okay? So just being honest about who you are, what you know, what you're good at, and or equally honest about what you don't know
Yeah.
is very important. And when you do that, I think people come to help you. And so I've never been embarrassed about saying I don't know anything, and will you help me?
Yeah.
So I've always found that to be quite a positive thing.
True. The other element is leadership without authority. And I think, when you don't have the authority and you're asked to take ownership, it's a phenomenal amount of courage, right? So how do you groom or how do you mentor youngsters to be able to establish that sense of confidence? Whether it's curiosity, whether it's going into the unknown, whether it's, getting comfortable with the dark. What would be the prep work which a youngster can look at to be ready for getting into this kind of a situation?
There's a whole chapter in my book, so I'd say to the youngster, go read. Go read my book, What the Heck Do I Do with My Life? I don't want to repeat what I've said. But in a nutshell, earlier and more you can put people outside their comfort zone, give them big challenges, and then they struggle and flail about, and then eventually they figure out how to succeed. That's how you build the confidence and the skills and the ability to lead without influence. Because when you're thrown into a complex challenge, many people don't report to you. You don't have authority.
Yeah.
And you have to learn how to get people to follow you. And that's leading by influence. And I give an example of these typical traffic jams we see in our cities where things are completely gridlocked. There's no cop to direct traffic.
Yeah.
And somebody gets out and they start getting people to do something, and then pretty soon things are flowing again.
Yeah.
And nobody knows who's that person, what is his name or her name, and they had no authority, and yet they stepped up in that situation and provided leadership. And that's what I say more and more is the kind of leadership we all need to be able to demonstrate. So how do you get young people to do that? By doing it. It's just a muscle. You have to practice it. And so as managers, as parents, the more we can get young people to go outside their comfort zone and try solving problems, the better. And one of the best ways to do that is take on civic problems. So problems in your neighbor around you, like somebody's dumped garbage and you need to fix it, or something else, tree cutting, tree planting, or whatever it is. Small problems around you, and getting together with your neighbors and trying to solve them is one of the most effective ways of learning how to lead by influence.
The other element, of course, is mental courage, right? How do you override your emotions? How do you stay calm when the emotions can get better of you? Would you like some instance where you were able to hold on to your emotional self and display courage?
I don't think there's an instance. I think every instance requires you to do that. And how do you develop this mental strength? Infinite amount are written about that, Hetal, as you know. I think for me, what helps is support system. So knowing that you have close friends, family, mentors, etc., that you can count on, or your own team dealing with a work situation. It's not like the whole world is on your shoulders.
Yeah.
That's what a team is all about. How do you draw on your support networks is important.
Right.
I think having faith is very important, whether it's religious faith or just belief in some higher power. You realize it's not just about you and you're just an actor, and you're able to surrender to a higher power. It's more liberating. Again, the pressure is not entirely on you. I think in the instance, breathing helps a lot. So mind and breath are completely connected, right? So in meditation, you learn to focus on your breath in order to calm your mind down. Yeah. So when you see your stomach tightening, you're anxious, you're angry, one of the best things you can do is just slow down and take deep breaths. There's a whole variety of techniques, but this is what works for me.
We obviously have a checkered background where you work with a lot of large companies, and then with Game, you're working with millions of potential and existing entrepreneurs. How do you differentiate courage working in a large firm versus being an entrepreneur? If you had to put them side by side, what works, what does not work in the two environments?
Entrepreneurship requires a lot more courage than just being an employee in a large company with safety nets and all those things.
Yeah.
But again, that's in the mind, because actually I've talked a lot about it. It's riskier today in 2026 to be in a job than to be an entrepreneur. Because in a job, anything can happen. The company can reorganize. You can get a new boss who doesn't like you. There could be a layoff because there's AI being introduced, whatever. 100 reasons why you could be a good performer doing everything, and boom, you're gone. This notion of safety is actually illusory. But an entrepreneur truly has to have a lot of courage, because you're constantly dealing with the unknown and having to solve for a lot of issues that pop up.
Yeah.
And the buck stops with you. If you can't meet payroll or whatever, you run out of money. It's you. It's high stakes. Anyway, long story.
The other aspect of courage is being vulnerable, displaying your emotions or showing empathy, and at times when you need to take a courageous decision. Would you like to cite any instance from your experience where it was really tough for you to, as they say, wear your emotion on your sleeve and defy that slogan, "Mard ko dard nahi hota hai"?
Any number of times when you have to make really difficult decisions. And what makes them difficult is somebody or a set of people are going to get hurt.
Yeah.
You have to close down a factory, which I've done, or you have to fire a person, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes it's not their fault, but these are all difficult situations. And I think the most important thing is to put yourself in their shoes. Not that it softens it, but I think it, as you say, the empathy is profound. I used to be somewhat cold-blooded about it. And early in my career, one of my mentors kicked my butt and said, look, any fool can fire a person, but if you're going to be a good leader, you have to do it in a way that leaves them an ambassador of you. And I thought that was one of the best pieces of advice I got from Mr. Arun Kirloskar. And I tried very hard over the years to be able to do it in that empathetic way and being able to show emotion and so on and so forth. Somehow I don't think of that as courageous. I think that's more about empathy and authenticity. So I don't find that it requires any great courage. Maybe it does, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it all depends on the state of mind at that point of time. What all have you gone through in the past? If you had a mentor of the type that you would probably emotionally would be much better prepared, but half the people might just lose sleep on the very instance that they have to do it. Of course, coming down to your book, writer's block is a very famous statement, right? A lot of people talk about the very effort required to write, and to write a book, of course, is the next level. So just give us a backstory of the book, what prompted you to write and what the heck I do with my life.
That was a difficult book because although I decided to write a book around 2016, I didn't actually have a contract till 2018, a book contract.
Okay.
And then I started writing. And it was a difficult book because I found that everything that had to be said had already been said by somebody before. So I kept saying, what is it that I have to say that is new? And then finally I realized what is new is just, it's my voice.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid. Then how do you strike the right tone so that when you write these self-help books, it's very easy to become preachy.
Yes.
And that's a turn off for the reader.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be preached to or told. So how do you find the right tone? So, it kept delaying and delaying and delaying. And then finally, what I always do in writing books is go off to the mountain somewhere and then lock myself up and get into a flow. And then it comes pouring out.
Yeah.
So that's how it happens. Right now, I'm in the throes of finishing another book on AI. And so that's exactly what I'll have to do. I'll have to go away for 3 or 4 weeks and get into the zone.
So you have had your rewriting journeys as well when you had to recompose and you felt that from a positioning perspective you wanted to work and make it sound different than what it would normally sound if it's quoted, right?
I don't do it that way. What I do is I just take lots and lots of notes. I take a whole pile of scraps of paper where my thoughts are there, whatever. And then I have to go away and get into a flow. Flow is a state of mind.
Yeah.
And when that happens, I literally feel like God is dictating and I'm only a typist. So it just comes.
Yeah.
And that draft tends to be about 80-90% good. But to get to that point takes me a long time.
You talk a lot about entrepreneurship, growth mindset, and you mentored a lot of young entrepreneurs. Any journey that you would talk about something which has, really pleased you a lot in terms of being able to pass on your knowledge and acumen to someone else and see that person life getting or work getting impacted through your learnings?
So that's what I do for a living, Hital. Every day I'm putting out stuff on social media, which is about passing on what I've learned. So for some years, since essentially 2021, I've been doing that. So it's not about any one moment, any big thing. It's continuous. Any number of people. On a given day, I'll get 3-4 messages of people who say, wow, the way you said that just changed my life because I realized I'm not the only one feeling this way. And it gave me the courage, the clarity, or whatever. Yeah. So I don't know what you're looking for in terms of one specific moment or anything. But that's what I do. Yeah. But if you're looking for a fun story, I think it was 2009 when a young guy came to see me. I was in Microsoft, and this was a Microsoft employee in Seattle. And he
Mhm.
said, hey, look, my H1B is expired and I'm not been renewed.
Mhm.
So I have to come back to India. What do I do? So I said, what do you want to do? So I actually want to start a business. And I said, what business do you want to start? And it turned out he wanted to start a business like Groupon business. So I said, what's preventing you from starting it? Well, leaving Microsoft, some possibility of failure. So I said, look, here's the deal. You go start it. If you fail, we'll take you back. And he said, deal. And he went off. And of course, he never came back. And that young chap was Kunal Bahl, who started Snapdeal. So like that, there are many people who've done something interesting, something important, something useful. Many people have become CEOs. Sometimes, one conversation just unlocks something in their mind. But I would say in my case, fortunately, there are tens of thousands of these. I'm just giving you one
Yeah.
because somewhat relatable name or something.
Correct. No, that was the idea, just to get to that, capture that aha moment, and the way you narrated the story of Kunal Bell obviously makes a lot of sense. The other element which is talked about a lot is nowadays is fitness and health. It's a topic which plays a lot of background prominence for a lot of right reasons and wrong reasons, whatever you want to call it. What's been your fitness journey? What's been your way for maintaining your health and fitness? Anything that the audience can learn from?
Not really. I'm not a good example. I used to run a lot.
Okay.
I was a really, really serious and good runner till about 2003 when my knee went out.
Oh,
And I
okay.
haven't been able to get back to running since then. I've never been fond of fitness and gyms and all that. I may have seen the inside of a gym once, but that was about it. And I had an uncle who lived till a very ripe age with great health. And so told me one day when he was drinking a whiskey, he said, if ever thought comes to your mind that you should exercise, he says, lie down and the feeling will soon pass. So,
I don't know if I'll have to edit this section, Ravi.
he was my inspiration. So look, I live a normal life. I'm vegetarian, and I think being vegetarian helps a lot in being reasonably healthy. I walk a lot. I tend to do 10, 15,000 steps a day.
Mhm.
I bought myself during COVID a treadmill desk. So
Right,
most of these types of, if we weren't recording, I'd be on that.
right.
So while I'm doing calls, when I'm writing, doing email, I'll usually be walking. So that
Okay.
helps. I do yoga every alternate day. I drink 2 glasses of wine every day for the last 30 years. God's grace, so far, so good.
But you do
So,
travel a lot, so are you able to maintain a
yeah.
regimen?
So I travel about 15 days in a month, and most of it is these days international. And
Yeah.
so that makes having a routine more difficult. But what I do
Mhm.
is still try to walk and keep my steps up. I still try to do my yoga in the room. I try to eat lots of healthy food. So I don't do anything crazy and outlandish like some Nitin Kamath or all these longevity gurus and all that stuff. And somehow I think I'm going to have the last laugh.
I'm sure about that. Is sleep a priority for you as well? Is that something which you keep a conscious
Yeah.
check?
I think sleep is essential. I manage to get 7 hours of sleep at night, and maybe sometimes a little more, 7.5. And if I can at all manage it, I'll sleep for 30, 40 minutes in the afternoon. Since
Yeah,
I stopped being an employee and I have the luxury of managing my own time, I
yeah,
try to take a quick, little power nap after lunch, which I enjoy.
yeah.
And yeah, but sleep is incredibly central to my well-being. And
Got it.
fortunately, I have no problem sleeping.
That's nice. You still keep a tracker with you, or it's all mental?
I just use my phone. So I just carry my little phone, and that has the app that counts all
Got
the right things.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't wear
A
a
ring.
ring or
Okay.
a Apple. I like mechanical watches, so I don't have a Apple Watch. But my
I
phone
got
is
I got my answer there.
yeah.
I see tall set of books behind my favorite question. What are the few books which you would be compelled to talk about every now and then? Something which resonates. I know you would have a long list, but a few which top of the mind comes to your mind.
Books I think which are perspective changing, life
Yeah.
changing, are very few. So one of the best was a book called Seven Habits of Highly Effective People that
Hmm.
came out around 1991.
Yeah.
And it has been just one of the most extraordinarily influential books in my life. Stephen
Hmm.
Covey. I highly recommend people listening to this read it. It's timeless. I stumbled into during a moment of crisis a version of the Gita by a chap called 𝗥nath
Oh
See,
yeah,
Gita itself is not, there are a million versions and all that.
yeah,
But Eknath explains it in a way which is actually joyous.
yeah.
So I was able to essentially absorb the lessons, which if you're actually trying to read some dry translation, you can't. I'll just make a final recommend. The third book, which has made a big impact, is Being Nobody, Going Nowhere. It's a book by a Buddhist writer.
Okay.
These are things which have really
The
changed.
third one sounds interesting. I'll definitely check it out. I've not heard about it.
It's a German Buddhist lady called 𝗖𝘂𝗪𝗓. Point is, look, we all tend to worry a lot about how other people think of us, and there is a big ego inside. And she points out, you're nobody.
Yeah.
And the moment you become comfortable with that is when things become easier. It's difficult, but
Got it.
yeah.
Are you big on movies, web series, anything that you would like to recommend?
Yeah.
Anything
So
recent?
I'm completely normal. I have Apple TV and Amazon Prime Video, and I have Netflix, and I have all the stuff, and I enjoy it. It's a way of chilling.
And any movie that you would recommend? Anything which comes to your mind which touched you? Away from the mainstream, of course.
No, my go-to movie, which I must have watched 50 times, who knows, 100 times, is the whole Godfather series.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because for me, it's got all the lessons of life and leading and etc. in it. Another one, which I think from a leadership perspective, which I love, is Shekhar Kapoor's two-part Elizabeth. Yeah, so those have been things that I keep going back to and enjoying.
My
I
last
also love all the Bond movies. So.
Okay. My last part is the favorite one. What's the question you have for me?
What's the impact you're trying to have by doing this?
I think the word you touched upon is part of my answer, impact. I do believe that we meet a lot of people, we see a lot of people. I think what I would love to see is how many people I actually impact, right? How many people I'm able to create an imprint or send out a message or say something that, oh yeah, what you did or what you said made a difference. I think that's the way it is. And if I had to put a number, I was thinking of 1 million, but that would be too much. But if I could just touch 1,000 people in my lifetime, I think that would be a big deal. Not people whom I know, and especially people who I don't know, right? They would have got impacted. And that's where subconscious or unconscious work comes in, right? If I walk into a class with the intent of impact, I know them, right? But if I've said something and someone observed it and kind of acted upon it. So that's the reason I asked you, sir. I've had many small, trivial instances where someone said, hey, you inspired me to run, or you inspired me to do this, right? That memory remains with me because it was unintended and yet it happened, right?
That's the most beautiful.
Exactly. Yeah. It's been a great experience going through your journey, and highly inspiring, sir. Thank you very much for this. And
I thank you for finding me and making the time and making the effort here. So I wish you great success in your impact journey, and all our listeners a happy new year.
Thank you very much, sir. Wish you all the best. Thank you. Bye.